Section 25 of Invisible Links. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. Invisible Links by Selma LagerlÃ. Translated by Pauline Bancroft Flack. Downie, Part 2. How has it come? That which she dares not call by name. It has come like the dew to the grass, like the color to the rose, like the sweetness to the berry, imperceptibly and gently, without announcing itself beforehand. It is also no matter how it came or what it is. Were it good or evil, fair or foul, still it is forbidden, that which never ought to exist. It makes her anxious, sinful, unhappy. It is that of which she never wishes to think. It is what shall be torn away and thrown out, and yet it is nothing that can be seized or caught. She shuts her heart to it, but it comes in just the same. It turns back the blood in her veins and flows there, drives the thoughts from her brain and reigns there, dances through her nerves and trembles in her fingertips. It is everywhere in her, so that if she had been able to take away everything else of which her body consisted and to have left it behind, there would remain a complete impression of her. And yet it was nothing. She wishes never to think of it, and yet she has to think of it constantly. How has she become so wicked? And then she searches and wonders how it came. Ah, Downie, how tender are our souls, and how easily awakened are our hearts. She was sure that it had not come at breakfast, surely not at breakfast. Then she had only been frightened and shy. She had been so terrified when she came down to breakfast and found no Moritz, only Uncle Theodore and the old lady. It had been a clever idea of Moritz to go hunting, although it was impossible to discover what he was hunting in midsummer, as the old lady remarked. But he knew, of course, that it was wise to keep away from his uncle for a few hours, until the latter became calm again. He could not know that she was so shy, nor that she had almost fainted when she had found him gone and herself left alone with Uncle and the old lady. Moritz had never been shy. He did not know what torture is. That breakfast, that breakfast! Uncle had as a beginning asked the old lady if she had heard the story of Sigrid the Beautiful. He did not ask Downie, neither would she have been able to answer. The old lady knew the story well, but he told it just the same. Then Anne-Marie remembered that Moritz had laughed at his uncle because in all his house he only had 2 books, and those were Afzelius' fairy tales and Nösselt's popular stories for ladies. But those he knows, Moritz had said. Anne-Marie had found the story pretty. She liked it when Bengt Lagman had pearls sewn on the breadth of homespun. She saw Moritz before her, how royally proud he would have looked when ordering the pearls. That was just the sort of thing Moritz would have done well. But when Uncle had come to that part of the story where Bengt Lagman went into the woods to avoid the meeting with his angry brother, and instead let his young wife meet the storm. Then it became so plain that Uncle understood Maurits had gone hunting to escape his wrath, and that he knew how she thought to win him over. Yes, yesterday, then they had been able to make plans, Maurits and she, how she should coquet with Uncle, but today she had no thought of carrying them out. Oh, she had never behaved so foolishly. Every drop of blood streamed into her face, and a knife and fork fell with a terrible clatter out of her hands down on her plate. But Uncle Theodore had shown no mercy, and had gone on with the story until he came to that princely speech. Had my brother not done it, I would have done it myself. He said it with such a strange emphasis that she was forced to look up and to meet his laughing brown eyes. And when he saw the trouble staring from her eyes, he began to laugh like a boy. What do you think, he cried, Bengt Lagman thought when he came home and heard that? Had my brother? I think he stopped at home the next time. Tears rose to Downie's eyes, and when Uncle saw that, he laughed louder. Yes, it is a fine partisan my nephew has chosen, he seemed to say. You are not playing your part, my little girl. And every time she had looked at him, the brown eyes had repeated, had my brother not done it, I would have done it myself. Downie was not quite sure that the eyes did not say nephew. And fancy how she behaved. She began to cry and rushed from the room. But it was not then that it came, nor during the walk of the forenoon. Then she was occupied with something quite different. Then she was overcome with the pleasure of the beautiful place, and that nature was so wonderfully near. She felt as if she had found again something she had lost long, long ago. People thought she was a city girl, but she had become a country lass as soon as she put her foot on the sandy path. She felt instantly that she belonged to the country. As soon as she had calmed down a little, she had ventured out by herself to inspect the place. She had looked about her on the lawn in front of the door. Then she suddenly began to whirl about. She hung her hat on her arm and threw her shawl away. She drew the air into her lungs so that her nostrils were drawn together and whistled. Oh, how brave she felt! She made a few attempts to go quietly and sedately down to the garden, but that was not what attracted her. Turning off to one side, she started towards the big group of barns and outhouses. She met a farm girl and said a few words to her. She was surprised to hear how brisk her own voice sounded. It was like an officer at the front. And she felt how smart she looked when, with head proudly raised and a little on one side, moving with a quick, free motion and with a little switch in her hand, she entered the barn. It was not, however, what she had expected. No long rows of horned creatures were there to impress her, for they were all out at pasture. A single calf stood in its pen and seemed to expect her to do something for him. She went up to him, raised herself on tiptoe, held her dress together with one hand, and touched the calf's forehead with the fingertips of the other. As the calf still did not seem to think that she had done enough and stretched out his long tongue, she graciously let him lick her little finger. She could not resist looking about her, as if to find someone to admire her bravery. And she discovered that Uncle Theodore stood at the barn door and laughed at her. Then he had gone with her on her walk. But it did not come then. Not then at all. It had only wonderfully come to pass that she was no longer afraid of Uncle Theodore. He was like her mother. He seemed to know all her faults and weaknesses, and it was so comfortable. She did not need to show herself better than she was. Uncle Theodore wished to take her to the garden and to the terrace by the pond, but that was not to her mind. She wished to know what there could be in all those big buildings. So he went patiently with her to the dairy and to the ice house, to the wine cellar and to the potato bins. He took the things in order and showed her the larder and the woodshed and the carriage house and the laundry. Then he led her through the stable of the draught horses and that of the carriage horses, let her see the harness room and the servants' rooms, the laborers' cottages and the wood carving room. She became a little confused by all the different rooms that Uncle Theodore had considered necessary to establish on his estate, but her heart was glowing with enthusiasm at the thought of how splendid it must be to have all that to rule over. So she was not tired, although they walked through the sheep houses and the piggeries, and looked in at the hens and the rabbits. She faithfully examined the weaving rooms and the dairies, the smoke house and the smithy, all with growing enthusiasm. Then they visited the big lofts, drying rooms for the clothes, and drying rooms for the wood, hay lofts, and lofts for dried leaves for the sheep to eat. The dormant housewife in her awoke to life and consciousness at all this perfection. But most of all she was moved by the great brew house and the two neat bakeries with the wide oven and the big table. Mother ought to see that, she said. In the bakehouse they had sat down and rested, and she had told of her home. He was already like a friend, although his brown eyes laughed at everything she said. At home everything was so quiet, no life, no variety. She had been a delicate child, and her parents had watched over her on account of it, and let her do nothing. It was only as play that she was allowed to help in the baking and in the shop. Somehow she came to tell him that her father called her Downie. She had also said, "Everybody spoils me at home except Moritz, and that is why I like him so much. He is so sensible with me. He never calls me Downie, only Anna Marie. Moritz is so admirable." Oh, how it had danced and laughed in Uncle's eyes. She could have struck him with her switch. She repeated almost with a sob, "Moritz is so admirable." "Yes, I know," Uncle had answered. "He is going to be my heir." Whereupon she had cried, "Ah, Uncle Theodore, why do you not marry? Think how happy anyone would be to be mistress of such an estate." "How would it be then with Moritz's inheritance?" Uncle had asked quite softly. Then she had been silent for a long while, for she could not say to Uncle that she and Moritz did not ask for the inheritance, for that was just what they did do. She wondered if it was very ugly for them to do so. She suddenly had a feeling as if she ought to beg Uncle for forgiveness for some great wrong that they had done him, but she could not do that either. When they came in again, Uncle's dog came to meet them. It was a tiny little thing, on the thinnest legs, with fluttering ears and gazelle-like eyes, and nothing with a shrill little voice. "You wonder perhaps that I have such a little dog," Uncle Theodore had said. "I suppose I do," she had answered. But you see, it is not I who have chosen Jenny for my dog, but Jenny who has taken me as a master. You would like to hear the story, Downie?" That name he had instantly seized upon. Yes, she would like it, although she understood that it would be something irritating he would say. "Well, you see, when Jenny came here the first time, she lay on the knees of a fine lady from the town, and had a blanket on her back and a cloth about her head. Hush, Jenny, it is true that you had it. And I thought what a little rat it was. But do you know, when that little creature was put down on the ground here, some memories of her childhood or something must have wakened in her. She scratched and kicked and tried to rub off her blanket. And then she behaved like the big dogs here. So we said that Jenny must have grown up in the country. She lay out on the doorstep and never even looked at the parlor sofa, and she chased the chickens and stole the cat's milk and barked at the beggars and darted about the horses' legs when we had guests. It was a pleasure and a joy to us to see how she behaved. You must understand, a little thing that had only lain in a basket and been carried on the arm. It was wonderful. And so when they were going to leave, Jenny would not go. She stood on the steps and whined so pitifully and jumped up on me and really asked to be allowed to stay. So there was nothing for us to do but to let her stay. We were touched by the little creature. It was so small and yet wished to be a country dog. But I had never thought that I should ever keep a lap dog. Soon perhaps I shall get a wife too. Oh, how hard it is to be shy, to be uneducated. She wondered if Uncle had been very surprised when she rushed away so hurriedly. But she had felt as if he had meant her when he spoke of Jenny. And perhaps he had not at all. But anyway, yes, she had been so embarrassed. She could not have stayed. But it was not then it came, not then. Perhaps it was in the evening at the ball. Never had she had such a good time at any ball. But if anyone had asked her if she had danced much, she would have needed to reconsider and acknowledge that she had not. But it was the best proof that she had really enjoyed herself when she had not even noticed that she had been a little neglected. She had so much enjoyed looking at Moritz, just because she had been a little bit severe on him at breakfast and laughed at him yesterday. It was such a pleasure to her to see him at the ball. He had never seemed to her so handsome and so superior. He had seemed to feel that she would consider herself injured because he had not talked and danced only with her. But it had been pleasure enough for her to see how everyone liked Moritz, as if she had wished to exhibit their love to the general gaze. Oh, Downie was not so foolish. Moritz danced many dances with the beautiful Elizabeth Westling, but that had not troubled her at all, for Moritz had time after time come up and whispered, "You see, I can't get away from her. We are old friends. Here in the country they are so unaccustomed to have a partner who has been in society and can both dance and talk. You must lend me to the daughters of the country magnates for this evening, Anne Marie." But Uncle too gave way to Moritz. "Be host for this evening," he said to him, and Moritz was. He was everywhere. He led the dance, he led the drinking, and he made a speech for the country and for the ladies. He was wonderful. Both Uncle and she had watched Moritz, and then their eyes had met. Uncle had smiled and nodded to her. Uncle certainly was proud of Moritz. She had felt badly that Uncle did not really do justice to his nephew. Towards morning Uncle had been loud and quarrelsome. He had wanted to join the dance, but the girls drew back from him when he came up to them and pretended to be engaged. Dance with Anne-Marie, Moritz had said to his uncle, and it had sounded rather patronizing. She was so frightened that she quite shrank together. Uncle was offended too, turned on his heel and went into the smoking room. Moritz came up to her and said with a hard voice: "You are ruining everything, Anna-Marie. Must you look like that when Uncle wishes to dance with you? If you could know what he said to me yesterday about you, you must do something too, Anna-Marie. Do you think it is right to leave everything to me?" "What do you wish me to do, Moritz?" "Oh, now there is nothing. Now the game is spoiled. Think all I had won this evening, but it is lost now." "I will gladly ask Uncle's pardon if you like, Moritz." And she really meant it. She was honestly sorry to have hurt Uncle. "That is, of course, the only right thing to do. But one can ask nothing of anyone as ridiculously shy as you are." She had not answered, but had gone straight to the smoking room, which was almost empty. Uncle had thrown himself down in an armchair. "Why will you not dance with me?" she had asked. Uncle Theodore's eyes were closed. He opened them and looked long at her. It was a look full of pain that she met. It made her understand how a prisoner must feel when he thinks of his chains. It made her sorry for Uncle. It seemed as if he had needed her much more than Moritz, for Moritz needed no one. He was very well as he was. So she laid her hand on Uncle Theodore's arm quite gently and caressingly. Instantly new life awoke in his eyes. He began to stroke her hair with his big hand. "Little mother," he had said. Then it came over her while he stroked her hair. It came stealing, it came creeping, it came rushing, as when elves pass through dark woods. End of part 2 of Downie from Invisible Links by Selma Lagerlöf. Translated by Pauline Bancroft Flack. Read by Lars Rolander.